first noticed her the way you notice someone who doesn't try to be noticed. She wasn't dressed to turn heads. No bright colors or sharp heels. Just a long gray coat, hair tied back in the kind of knot you make when you're not thinking about it. She was standing at the counter of the small cafe near campus, speaking quietly to the barista. I'd been going there for months, mostly because it was never crowded, and the coffee wasn't great, but it was predictable. That morning, I was half awake, scrolling through a half-written message to someone I'd never send, when I heard her voice. Low, careful, like she measured every word before letting it go. The barista asked if she wanted her usual, and she smiled. Just a small curve of the lips, but it stayed with me. She had a usual. When it was my turn, she was still at the end of the counter, waiting. I ordered what I always ordered, and before I realized I'd said it out loud, I added, "Guess I don't have a usual yet." For the first time, she looked at me. Really looked. Her eyes were soft, but steady, the kind that made you feel like she was seeing more than what was in front of her. She didn't laugh, not exactly, but there was something in the way her mouth shifted, like she almost did. "Give it time," she said, and that was it. Just 3 words, but I caught myself smiling longer than I should have. Over the next weeks, I started noticing patterns. She always came in around the same time, always ordered the same drink. Sometimes she read from a worn paperback. Sometimes she just sat with her cup, stirring even when there was nothing left to dissolve. I caught myself timing my mornings differently, lingering over my coffee until she arrived. It wasn't intentional, at least not at first. But there was something about her presence, quiet, unhurried, that made the room feel steadier. One morning, I was sketching something in my notebook, a half-finished diagram for class, when she set her cup on the table across from mine. Not sitting, just resting it there while she adjusted her bag. "You always write like that?" she asked, nodding toward my messy notes. I froze for a second, pen hovering. "Like what?" "Like you're racing yourself." I laughed, though it came out awkward, too quick. "Bad habit, I guess." She tilted her head, studying the page for a second longer than felt casual. "Or maybe you just think too fast for the paper." It wasn't flirtation. Not really. More like she was making an observation no one else would bother to make. But I felt it anyway, a warmth under my skin that surprised me. After that, we exchanged small words here and there. Nothing big. She once remembered that I always got my drink without sugar. Another time, I held the door open for her, and she gave me that same almost smile. But mostly it was silence. Comfortable, then not. I'd notice how her fingers wrapped around the cup, always warming it before she took a sip, or how she folded the napkin into neat squares before leaving it behind. Small, ordinary gestures, but they stayed with me. I started drafting messages on my phone, half-thoughts, questions I'd never send. "Do you always sit by the window? What book was that yesterday?" Then I'd backspace until the screen was blank again. It wasn't that I didn't want to speak. It was that I didn't know what right I had to ask. She seemed older than me, not just in years, but in the way she carried silence like a second skin. One rainy evening, when the cafe was almost empty, I saw her sitting alone, staring into her untouched cup. Something about the way her hand hovered, then pulled back, as if she couldn't decide whether to take a sip, kept me frozen at the door. She looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from something else, something heavier. When she finally noticed me, she straightened, as if caught in a private moment. I gave a small nod, unsure if I should walk over. Her lips parted like she might say something, then closed again. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and typed quickly.
A moment later, mine buzed.
I looked down at the screen, confused. A number I didn't recognize. Just a single line of text. "You're here every morning too. Tomorrow, sit with me." And that was the first time I realized this quiet routine had been something more. For both of us the next morning, I almost didn't go. I told myself it was better to leave things where they were, unspoken, harmless. But by the time the clock hit 9, I was already on the sidewalk outside the cafe, heart thudding harder than it should for something as ordinary as coffee. She was there, as promised, at the small corner table by the window. Her coat draped over the back of the chair, her hands wrapped around her cup. When she looked up and saw me, it wasn't surprise I found in her eyes. It was something steadier, like she'd already decided this. I sat down. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I fiddled with the cardboard sleeve around my cup, peeling at the edge. She folded her napkin into half, then into quarters. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't, not completely. More like standing at the edge of something neither of us knew how to name. "You're younger than I thought," she said finally, voice quiet. I tried to laugh it off. "That's not usually a compliment." Her eyes softened.
No.
"I don't mean it like that." She hesitated, then looked out the window. "It's just, when you first started coming here, I thought you were older. The way you sit, the way you watch people. I didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to ask how old she thought I was, but it felt childish. Instead, I said, 'And you?'" Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Old enough to know better." The words landed heavier than she meant, maybe, or maybe exactly as she meant. Over the next weeks, we kept meeting there. Not always planned, not always spoken about, but it happened anyway. Some mornings she'd tell me about a book she was rereading, or a recipe that hadn't turned out right. Small truths slipped between sips of coffee. Once, she admitted she hated Sundays because the silence in her house was louder than on any other day. I almost told her that I hated Sundays too, but for different reasons, that I'd catch myself scrolling through my contacts, hovering over names I didn't call, writing messages I'd never send. Instead, I just nodded, and she seemed to understand. One evening, the rain came down heavy, and she offered me a ride. The car smelled faintly of cinnamon, the radio low with some old song I didn't recognize. She drove with both hands on the wheel, focused, calm. But when we stopped outside my building, she didn't unlock the doors right away. We sat in the stillness, the sound of rain filling the space. "Don't read too much into this," she murmured. "I wasn't," I lied. Her hand brushed against mine when I reached for the handle, a quick accidental touch. But it stayed in my skin long after I'd stepped out into the rain. It wasn't that I didn't notice the difference between us. I noticed it constantly, in the way people glanced when we stood too close in line, in the way I caught myself studying the faint lines near her eyes, in the way she avoided saying her age out loud. Sometimes I'd imagine it, what others might think if they knew. A young man, barely finished with school. A woman old enough to have a son my age. Maybe she did. Maybe that was why she hesitated, why she always pulled back before the silence stretched too far. And yet, every time we parted, I wanted the silence back. One afternoon, we sat across from each other, both pretending to read. I wasn't really following the words on the page. I was too aware of her presence, the way she kept brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Out of nowhere, she said softly, 16 years ago, I made a mistake, one I thought I could bury. Her voice was steady, but her eyes stayed on the coffee cup. My husband left because of it. He left me, and he left her. I didn't ask who. The truth was already there, hanging heavy between us. I wanted to reach across the table, but I didn't. Instead, I folded my napkin into smaller and smaller squares until it felt ridiculous. She noticed, and a small laugh escaped her. Fragile, but real. When she stood to leave, she touched my shoulder lightly, just a brush of fingers, as if to steady me. To anyone watching, it would have meant nothing. But to me, it felt like the start of everything. It started to feel like routine again. Same corner table. Same 2 cups cooling too fast between us. But underneath, everything had shifted. I could feel it in the way she no longer glanced away as quickly, in how my hands lingered near hers on the table, just close enough to feel the warmth, never close enough to touch. One morning, she didn't come. I sat alone, watching the door open, close, open again, pretending to read, my phone buzzing quietly in my pocket. I didn't check it. When I finally did, hours later, it was just one line, "Busy today."
No explanation. No smile.
Nothing else. The next day she was back, but different, tired, distracted. When I asked if everything was okay, she shook her head, too quickly. Fine. Just life. And I let it go, though I didn't want to. A week later, someone else noticed. We were standing in line together. She in her gray coat, me holding my notebook under my arm, when a classmate from campus walked in. He saw me first, grinned, then looked at her, and something in his grin shifted, puzzled. You too? He asked, half a joke. Her hand froze on the counter. Mine tightened around the notebook. No, she said too sharply. Then softer. No, just coffee. The classmate nodded, still smiling, but not really. When he left, she didn't look at me. Not once. I should have said something, eased the air between us. But I couldn't. My throat felt tight, like the words had dried there. The distance stayed for days. She sat with her hands folded, staring at the window instead of me. I caught myself making small mistakes, forgetting to stir sugar, leaving pages half-written, my mind circling around the silence. Finally, one evening, she broke it. I shouldn't be here with you like this. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even directed at me, not exactly. Just a thought spoken into the space between us. Why not? I asked. Her fingers twisted the napkin, tearing it slowly into strips. Because people look. Because they'll talk. Because you don't know what you want yet. The last part cut. Because maybe it was true. But when she said it, I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that I did know. That what I wanted was right there in front of me, folding paper into nothing. Instead, I said nothing. That night, we left the cafe together. Rain misting down, the street glistening with blurred reflections. We walked slower than usual, shoulders brushing once. Then again. She stopped under the awning of a closed bookstore, pulled her coat tighter. I stood there, not ready to say goodbye, not ready to watch her walk away into the night. You remind me of something I thought I'd forgotten, she said finally. What's that? She shook her head, eyes lowering. Doesn't matter. But it did. I could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her bag strap. I reached out, not thinking, just moving, and my fingers brushed the back of her hand. Warm, fragile. She didn't pull away. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady this time, closer than we'd ever been. The world shrank to that space. The sound of rain, the faint hum of a streetlight, her breath mingling with mine. Then she exhaled sharply and stepped back. Just enough. We should go, she whispered. I nodded, though everything in me wanted to stay, to close the gap we'd left open. We stood there one beat longer. Two. And in that hesitation lived everything we hadn't said. It was late afternoon when we found ourselves walking together again. The cafe had closed early for repairs, so we drifted down the street without deciding where to go. The sky was the color of old paper, the kind of gray that presses down, heavy but not storming. She walked with her hands in her coat pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. I kept my steps matched to hers, even when the silence stretched long. Strange, she said finally, eyes on the ground. I don't usually walk with anyone. Me neither. She gave the smallest laugh, the kind that ends almost before it starts. We stopped at a bench outside the park. It was damp from the morning rain, but she sat anyway, smoothing her coat beneath her. I followed, though too close at first. She shifted slightly, and I mirrored the space she needed. For a while, we just watched people pass. Families with strollers, an older man with a dog, a girl in headphones humming under her breath. Normal life moving around us, as if nothing were out of place. Do you ever feel like you're borrowing time? She asked suddenly. I turned, surprised. What do you mean? Her hands tightened in her lap. Like, sitting here with you, it feels like I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. Like someone's going to tap my shoulder and tell me my time's up. I didn't know how to answer. My throat went dry. She kept going, her voice steadier than I expected. 16 years ago, I made a choice that ruined everything. My husband left. My daughter, she grew up believing someone else was her father. And now, she stopped, pressed her lips together. And now I sit here with you, pretending I'm allowed. I wanted to tell her she was allowed, that no one was watching, that I wasn't judging her past, or the years she carried in her shoulders. But the words tangled inside me, caught between caution and need. Instead, I said, "I don't feel like I'm pretending." She turned then, her eyes sharp, searching, like she wanted to see if I meant it. I held her gaze, even though my pulse was stumbling. The air between us thickened, almost too much. She looked away first, but not before I caught the faint tremor in her breath. A boy with a basketball jogged past, breaking the moment. We both blinked, as if waking from something. She rubbed her temples lightly. "This is dangerous," I swallowed. "Because of the age thing?" Her mouth twitched, not a smile. "Because of everything." I wanted to ask what everything meant. The history, the silence, the way her hand brushed mine that night in the rain and stayed in my skin. But instead, I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the cracked sidewalk. "I keep thinking," I admitted quietly, "that if I don't see you tomorrow, I won't know what to do." Her head turned sharply. For a second, I regretted saying it. Too bare. Too much. But she didn't push me away. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" She hesitated. Her fingers twisted together, then stilled. "Because I'll believe you." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the squeak of the basketball echoing in the distance. I could feel her body tense, then soften, as if fighting herself in the small movements of her shoulders. I wanted to reach for her hand, just once. Not even for more, just to feel the truth of her skin in mine. She shifted closer, almost without realizing. Our knees brushed lightly. Neither of us moved away. I turned to her, the words rising before I could stop them. "Do you?" She inhaled sharply, cutting me off. Not with words, but with the way her eyes caught mine, wide and raw. A question hanging between us. And that's where it stopped. A question neither of us dared finish. The next morning, she wasn't there. I told myself it was nothing. People get busy, they change their routines. But when I went back the following day, same empty corner, same cold cup cooling too quickly in front of me. The absence settled heavier than the coffee in my stomach. By the third day, I stopped pretending. She was avoiding me. The silence stretched out like a thread pulled too far. I wrote her number into my phone, scrolled past it a dozen times, typed out messages. "Everything okay? Did I say something wrong? Should I stop waiting?" Then deleted each one before my thumb could hit send. On the fourth day, she appeared. Not in the cafe, but outside it, walking quickly past with her coat collar turned up. She didn't look inside, didn't slow down. I almost ran after her, almost called her name. But something in the way she moved, focused, closed, stopped me. Later that evening, I passed by her car parked near the bookstore. A child's car seat sat in the back. Pink straps, a folded blanket. My breath caught. I'd never asked, she'd never told me. And suddenly, a whole part of her life opened up in my head. One I'd never been invited into. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next time I saw her, she looked tired. Not the quiet tired I was used to, but a kind that came from somewhere deeper. She spotted me before I could pretend I hadn't seen her. For a moment she almost smiled, then didn't. "You shouldn't wait for me anymore," she said, voice soft but firm. "Why not?" I asked too quickly. "Because this isn't—" She trailed off, searching for the word. "This isn't fair." "To who?" "To anyone," she said and looked away. The silence after that wasn't comfortable. It was sharp, a wall dropping between us. I wanted to climb over it, to push against it, but my feet stayed rooted. In the days that followed, I changed my own patterns. Woke later, took coffee elsewhere, told myself it was easier not to risk running into her. But everywhere I went, I found myself glancing at doorways, half expecting her to step through. It became a strange rhythm, waiting without waiting. One night, I sat at my desk with my phone glowing in my hand. I typed her name. Then, "I miss our mornings." My thumb hovered over the screen. Pause stretched, unbearable. Then I erased it. Another draft. "Can we talk?" Delete. One more. Just tell me not to come back, and I won't. Delete. The phone went dark in my palm. A week later, I walked past the cafe just to see. Her table was empty. Another couple sat there, laughing over muffins, their voices bright. I stood outside too long, watching through the glass, until the barista noticed me and waved. I waved back, forced a smile, and kept walking. The seat stayed empty in my head all night. I didn't know what hurt more. The thought that she had decided, or the thought that she hadn't. That she was sitting somewhere else, in another quiet corner, still stirring her coffee long after the sugar dissolved. And me, on the outside of it, holding a sentence neither of us had finished. It happened on an ordinary evening. No reino, no crowded café. Just her doorstep. I hadn't planned to go. I walked past twice before I forced myself up the path. Her light was on in the kitchen, spilling a rectangle of yellow into the yard. I almost turned back, but then the door opened, and there she was, holding a dish towel, hair loosely tied, like she'd just stepped away from the stove. Her eyes widened, then softened. You shouldn't be here. I know. The silence stretched, heavy. She didn't close the door. I didn't step inside. We stood in the narrow gap between what was right and what we wanted. Finally, she let out a small breath, set the towel on the counter behind her, and said, "You should come in." Her kitchen was warmer than I expected, cluttered in a lived-in way. Papers stacked on the counter. A mug left half full by the sink. The smell of onions, faint but comforting. I leaned against the doorway while she busied herself at the stove, though the food was already finished. She stirred it anyway, metal spoon scraping softly against the pan. "You stopped coming," I said. "You noticed." Her tone wasn't teasing, just tired. I waited. She kept stirring, even though there was nothing left to stir. "I know." I moved closer, not too close, but enough that she felt it. Her shoulders tightened, then eased. "I thought maybe you didn't want me around anymore," I admitted. My voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. Her hand stilled on the spoon. She set it down carefully, as if even that action needed thought. "It's not that." "Then what?" She turned, finally meeting my eyes. "It's everything else." There it was. The weight of 16 years. The daughter. The mistake. The life she couldn't erase. "I can't give you what you think you want," she said, voice breaking only a little. I shook my head. "I don't think. I just—" The words faltered, stuck in my chest. I forced them out anyway. "I just want to be here. With you." Her laugh was soft, but it caught at the edges. "You're too young to know what that means." "Maybe. But I know what it feels like." The silence that followed was raw, stripped of all the small pretenses we'd been hiding behind. She pressed a hand against the counter, steadying herself. I could see it, the conflict pulling at her, the part of her that wanted to step back and the part that didn't. Then she said it, barely more than a whisper. "You make me feel like I didn't ruin everything." The words hit harder than I was ready for. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. Slowly, carefully, I reached across the space and laid my hand over hers where it rested on the counter. She didn't move, didn't pull away, just closed her eyes for a moment. Like the weight of letting herself stay still in that touch was both too much and not enough. When she opened them again, they were wet. She blinked quickly, but didn't try to hide it. "This won't be easy," she said. "I'm not asking for easy." Her lips curved, the faintest, most fragile smile. For the first time, it felt unguarded. She turned her hand, slowly, until her fingers threaded through mine. A small, human gesture. Nothing grand, but it felt like everything had led here.
No declarations. No promises.
Just her hand in mine, warm and real. And a soft word from her lips, quiet but steady. "Okay." It didn't change overnight. Nothing ever really does. Some mornings she still came late, sometimes not at all. Some evenings I left messages unsent, whole sentences backspaced into nothing. But slowly, in the quiet ways that last, we began to stitch a rhythm. She let me carry her groceries once. Said it was silly, but she didn't stop me. I left my books on her counter, promising to come back for them, then forgetting on purpose. She learned the exact time I always walked past the park bench. 8:47 a.m., when the morning light slanted through the trees, and once, she was already there waiting, coffee in hand. Black, no sugar, just how I liked it. Guess you've got a usual now, she teased. We laughed, and it wasn't sharp or nervous this time. It was easy. Her daughter wasn't a secret anymore. I met her one afternoon, only in passing, a teenager darting through the kitchen for a jacket and keys. She gave me a curious look, but nothing more. Later, when the door shut behind her, I noticed the way her shoulders sagged with relief. I thought it would feel worse, she admitted. It didn't. No, she smiled faintly. It felt normal. That was the first time she reached for me, unprompted, her fingers brushing mine across the counter. Small, unremarkable, but enough. Seasons turned. The cafe reopened, the one where it started. We went back together one morning, though we sat farther from the window this time. Safer, quieter. The barista looked up, recognition flickering. Two usuals? He asked. We glanced at each other, trying not to laugh. Yeah, I said. Two usuals. She stirred her tea longer than necessary, like always. I folded my napkin into neat squares, like always. Little habits, holding all the weight we never said out loud. It isn't perfect. Some nights she pulls away, lost in thought, her gaze turned inward. Some mornings I wake with doubts, wondering how long this fragile thing can hold. But then she'll brush my sleeve as we walk, or leave the light on in the kitchen when she knows I'll be late. Love doesn't feel like a grand declaration. Feels like returning, like finding your seat still empty, waiting. And every time I sit down beside her, I know, life did finish the sentence after all. One evening, we passed the old bench again, the one where everything nearly began and nearly ended. She stopped, tapped the wood lightly. Strange, she said. I used to feel like I was borrowing time here. And now, her hand slipped into mine. Now it feels like it's ours. And I believed her. Not because she said it, but because in that moment it was true.